If you were not present last week, then you might not know that I decided that we would go back on another journey through the books of Daniel and Revelation. And I spent some time last week explaining why I'm not really going to go through verse by verse through all of the books, but I want to go through those parts that let me say, I understand best of all, and that I believe give us the framework for understanding what these books are talking about. I am very big on the idea that the most important thing is that we should understand, we should get a grasp of the big picture. I'm very, very strong on that idea. I believe that once we get an overall view of any subject, once we get the big picture, then we're already 80% through understanding. We're already 80% of the way there, maybe more than 80%. I'm just throwing a number out there because I believe to zoom out and understand what is happening on a big scale, the bigger picture, that is the key. And it doesn't matter whether we are looking at the subject of salvation or the subject of the kingdom or the subject of the judgment, whatever it may be, or just trying to understand the books of Daniel and Revelation. That's the most important thing. You know, Sister Esther, she sent me a little clip from a book. I think it's from a book. Somebody did a book on the subject of Revelation. But I want to read what this says because I find it very interesting. Because it's true. And let me read it for you. As a matter of fact, I don't know. I guess let me bring it up on the screen so we can read it together. Um, all right. It says I'm going to use my highlighter. It says John's Apocalypse, referring of course to the book of Revelation, infamously defies interpretation. Of course, all complex writings do to some degree. In most cases, interpretive difficulty seems more like a bug in the nature of language than a feature of the work itself. What this is saying is that what the person is saying is that most of the time when you have difficulty in understanding something, it's more because it's more because language is a little difficult to interpret or to break down. We have a problem with comprehending language most of the time. And it doesn't seem that the thing we are reading is really designed to confuse us. And the person says, with great insight, yeah, I think, revelation is different. More often than not, it seems divinely inspired to resist any hermeneutical stabilization. I certainly don't want to confuse myself or confuse any of you by these theological terms, hermeneutical. I'm not even sure I know what that means. But anyway, what he's saying, to break it down to my level, what he's saying simply is that it seems like Revelation is designed that you cannot use the rules of grammar to interpret it. I agree. I agree. I like that this fellow is seeing this. For nearly 2,000 years, earnest and brilliant scholars have tried to demonstrate otherwise. They've set out to show that, you can understand it using hermeneutical principles, arguing for some new structural, literary, or historical key. that would be able to tame the book at last. You know, they talk about what's the name they give to this method where you read it backwards, you read it forwards, you read it backwards, where the text reads towards a middle point and then it reads the opposite way from the other direction. They have a term for it I can't understand. They look for this in Revelation and they say, you can see here, if anybody remembers the name, you can remind me. But anyway, they look for this. They're looking for some kind of structure. They say that Revelation, they say that John borrows from Daniel and John borrows from Ezekiel. I read their statements and I want to puke because they are trying to make divine inspiration into human methodology. They're trying to credit the writing style of Revelation to John borrowing from Daniel, all kinds of garbage. What they do effectively is they try to destroy the inspired nature of the book.
I think,
It's
brother
not.
David, I think, brother
Yes.
Dave, they might call that a chiasm
Thank
or
you,
something
brother.
to that
That's
effect.
exactly what I'm looking for. Chiasm, right? All right. They refer to it as a chiastic structure. Okay, chiasm. Right. The word eluded me there. Thank you, brother Warren. Yeah. So they find all kinds of. They say if you read Revelation from the first chapter and read to the middle chapter, you get the story this way. And if you read now from chapter 20 and you start coming backwards, you find that the chapters at each level seem to match up. And they say that this helps to interpret the book. And I look at some of those things and I think they are bending and twisting and they are really trying hard to find what is not there. Anyway, this person goes on to say, ironically, their efforts as yet have best succeeded in furnishing evidence for the case they hoped to disprove. In other words, the more they try to find some new structure or some way of making the book sensible and cohesive, they only create further evidence that there's no method or structure they can use that enables them to interpret the book. The apocalypse, like some spooky quantum particle, defies our cleverest categories. That it does so produces more than hermeneutical frustration. It also poses a theological question that until recently has been hard to hear. In short, what might be the theological significances of an inherently, even flamboyantly decentered text? All right. Yeah, this is complicated. If you're not if you're not good at comprehension, you might wonder what on earth is this person trying to say. But notice in the last line, he describes Revelation as a flamboyantly decentered text. What he means is that the text of Revelation, it's not centered on a particular theme that can help you to understand the book. He refers to it as decentered, a decentered text. In other words, the whole thing seems to be disjointed and it doesn't fit together in some cohesive way. It seems to be inherent in the way the book is written. The book seems to be designed this way to be confusing. It seems to be designed to follow no pattern or structure that you can make sense of. And he says it's not only this way, but it is flamboyantly this way, which means that it is bold and aggressive and widely displayed to be this kind of thing. So anyway, this ran this came to my mind just now because I'm thinking this is exactly the point of view that people have of the book of Revelation, and with justification, because the point is that Revelation is the most difficult book in the entire Bible to understand. It's the most difficult. There's nothing anywhere else in the Bible and maybe in any religious text that is as challenging as Revelation. The thing that makes it so difficult and so fascinating is that it claims so much and yet it seems to produce so little. What do I mean? God says, "Blessed is the one who reads and the one who keeps those things that are written in it." As we saw last week in the book of Daniel, it says that the wicked shall do wickedly, none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise will understand. There is so much claim made for the book. Jesus appears to John on the Isle of Patmos, and Jesus personally takes John on a tour in heaven to explain something that he claims to be of extreme importance. And then you go to the book itself, and you can't make head or tail of it. And that has been the story for 2,000 years. And so that is why the book has been so challenging, so confusing, and yet so fascinating. And this is why, for me, even as we are studying it together, I am eager to help us to see that God is helping us to make a breakthrough. Brother Ken, go ahead.
I just wanted to, I had a question about what that person wrote when it came to how texts are, like the methods and stuff. I don't really know, like I've heard of chiastic before, but I'm not very literate in these methods. So the biblical principle of line upon line, precept upon precept, because it seems to me what this article is talking about is that Revelation taken apart from the rest of the Bible is hard to understand, but biblical principle using line upon line, precept upon precept, we can go back and forth to Daniel and different places to better understand. So is is that kind of what's going on here?
I partially would agree with what you say, Brother Ken, but the thing is that there are a lot of, I have been exposed to a lot of ideas relating to Revelation. And many of them have approached it using that principle of line upon line, precept upon precept, comparing scripture with scripture. And you end up with not only texts or interpretations that are very different from one another, but also you end up with ideas that are, some of them are very extreme and very confusing. And uh, while I think that that is a part, or that is a part of the solution, I think it's a part of the solution that comes later on, because there's something at the beginning that is fundamental, and if you don't get that beginning fundamental, then your line upon line, precept upon precept is not going to go anywhere. And I think one
Oh,
of the, I
okay.
think that is what has happened with Revelation over the ages, maybe over the years. They have gone to line upon line, precept upon precept, but they don't understand what is the purpose behind the book, what is the overall purpose, what is the greater purpose behind it. And that is where I feel extremely, extremely enthused about our studies of Revelation, because as even though I am wary, I'm cognizant of the statements that people make sometimes, that we need to be careful of developing an elitist mindset, as though we think that we are ahead of everybody else and that we think we are somebody special, or we are something special. I'm acutely aware of this, and I'm very sensitive to it. But at the same time, I'm also desirous of being very truthful in how I express things. And if I were to say to everybody here that I don't think we have some insight into the book of Revelation, some unusual insight, I probably would be guilty of understating the truth. I'd be guilty of saying what I don't really believe, because the problem with making claims is when you focus the claims on yourself. But if I say God is working mightily, and I praise God for it, and we happen to be blessed through that working of God, I don't think I should be cautious about saying it, because the problem is when I try to take the credit for myself or to give the credit to some human being. But I do believe one of the things that makes me so enthused about this book of Revelation is because I think, as an accumulation of things that people have looked at before, but maybe that has come together in a way that we didn't see before. I think we're understanding the purpose behind Revelation and Daniel in a way that I don't think I've ever understood or seen it explained before. And that is very exciting for me. And once you get that overall picture, once you get that overall idea, what is behind the book? Why is it there in the Bible? What is God trying to say? Why did God do this? Was it simply a complicated way of telling the future? Because that's how most people see Revelation. It's a complicated way of telling the future. Oh my goodness. I suppose all prophecy is to some extent a little complex, right? The prophecies about Jesus' first coming, they were complicated, right? But nothing matches Revelation. The complexity of Revelation, the design of Revelation, the tedious detail in Revelation. Our God designed it. God had something special in mind when He put Revelation together. So, all of this is reason to be excited when you begin to feel like you're getting somewhere in understanding Revelation. So, anyway, so the key is to understand this bigger picture, to understand, to zoom out and look at everything and see, oh, this is what is happening. And then you can fit in the details. And if you are even wrong on one or two details, it's not the most critical thing. The most important thing is to get the big picture. So that's where we are in that's why we're going back over these books of Daniel and Revelation again. And maybe we're going to do it more times in the future as well. But I don't even know why I went through all of that. I think I'm still trying to justify us going back to Revelation again for a third time. But anyway, so that's that. We're going to go to the slides, and we're going to pick up from where we left off last week. So even before we go there, or maybe I should use the screen as a backdrop. It's probably more interesting than me sitting here talking. So give me a second, guys. I think I'm on the wrong. Let me see. Am I on the right page? All right. Okay. Yeah. So last week we looked at the question of what is the theme of the book of Daniel, and what we tried to establish last week was that the key to understanding Revelation is the book of Daniel. So all that I just said about the importance of Revelation and about the keys that are in Revelation and about zooming out and getting a big view of Revelation, all of that now becomes subject to something else. And that something else is, first of all, grasping the message of the book of Daniel. So God gave it to us this way. He gave us Daniel first, and He says, in the end of time, the book of Daniel will be opened. Shut up the book and seal the book till the time of the end. Then the book of Daniel will be opened. And when the book of Daniel is opened, then now we have the key to understand what is going on in the book of Revelation. And that's exactly how it plays out in the understanding that we have been looking at and that we're going to be sharing again. So understanding Revelation, the thing we emphasized last week was that the key is in the book of Daniel. And this week I want to highlight now, particularly not just the book of Daniel, but Daniel chapter 7, the key that we find in Daniel chapter 7. All right. And I don't know why I always have to apologize in a way when I use this phrase. I don't think apologize is the right word, but I am sensitive because this is so much a concept that is tied up with a certain denomination. Pardon me for putting it this way, but this video goes to the entire world. It's not just for a denomination. So I don't even want to call the name of the denomination because some people are so sensitive. Anyway, I'm talking about Seventh-day Adventism. They are the group that focuses on a judgment before Jesus comes again. The concept that is embraced by Adventists is entitled the investigative judgment. I do not use that term, and I do not like that term because there are ideas associated with it that I don't agree with. So I am not promoting or pushing the investigative judgment. Okay? So instead, I want to refer to this as the pre-Advent judgment, which means it's the same thing, but with a different emphasis. All right? So if it seems like it's nitpicking and it's just simply redefining the same thing, that is not true. And when you listen carefully and when you watch what is being said, you will understand that it is not true. The pre-Advent judgment that I want to highlight this evening is absolutely Bible-based. It's from the Bible and it's nowhere else, and I'm not going to touch any other authority but the Bible. And it's using the Bible, and the evidence is so clear that if you are an honest person, you don't have any alternative but to accept it. If you reject it after looking at the evidence I present this evening, I would have to believe that you're not an honest person. You're allowing bias and prejudice to blind you to what the Bible is saying. So I believe that these two statements, the key is in Daniel 7. And in Daniel 7, what we find is the pre-Advent judgment. And this is the key to understanding the book of Revelation. This is what I hope to demonstrate this evening. Now, of course, we know that in the book of Daniel, in chapter 7, Daniel saw the history of the world, or that's how we describe it. He saw 4 animals coming up out of the sea: a lion with 2 wings, a bear with 3 ribs in the mouth of it that came upon one side, a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings, and a great and terrible beast with 10 horns, great iron teeth, and claws of brass. Now we know that there is probably no question at all. Probably everybody who reads the book of Daniel agrees that these 4 beasts represented 4 of the great empires of the world. The lion representing the kingdom of Babylon, the bear representing the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians, referred to as Medo-Persia, the leopard representing the kingdom of Greece, which was divided up into the 4 divisions, and the great and terrible beast representing the kingdom of Rome, which dominated the world in the time of Christ, which sort of passed from the scene for hundreds of years, and which has always been somewhere in the background operating as the nations of Europe. This is what Daniel saw in a vision which he had in Daniel 7. As a matter of fact, I know it's always good to read the Bible when you are saying certain things. So let me just read the first verse of Daniel chapter 7, just because sometimes you take things for granted, and there may be just somebody in this room or watching this video who never saw this before. So let me just read. In the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, I'm in Daniel 7. Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. And he goes on and tells you what he saw. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. We just saw that. Another beast, a second like to a bear. It had three ribs in the mouth of it. It goes on to say, I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard. It had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl. And then he talks about the fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. So this is what he saw. And this is what these illustrations are intended to signify. So, after this, after Daniel saw these four animals, let me go back to the Bible. Here's something I missed out. It says, there was a little horn that came upon the head of the fourth beast. And it says, in this horn there were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So there was a little horn that came up on the head of beast number 4. So on the head of this beast, another little horn came up, and it tells you that this little horn that came up, I don't really have the illustration handy. I have it somewhere, but I didn't want to go there yet. Let me go quickly to it then. Let me jump ahead. All right. Sorry, I had to skip ahead to get to this. But in the middle of the horns, there came up a little horn that was bigger than the other horns. It had the eyes and the mouth of a man, and it was speaking great things. That's what Daniel saw. So let me drift back now quickly to where I was. The next thing that Daniel says, and now we're going to start paying careful attention if we were not paying close attention before. This is where we want to try to understand how do we find the secret to revelation here? How do we find the secret to understanding revelation here in Daniel 7? All right, so Daniel says, I beheld, I kept on looking till the thrones were cast down. Now the word cast down is a mistranslation, okay? It gives it the idea that somebody took up some thrones and threw them violently down, but no. The word should really be the thrones were set in place. That's what it means. They brought out some thrones or some fancy seats and they put them in place. And the Ancient of Days did sit. So here is one of those visions where you actually see God the Father. He's referred to as the Ancient of Days. And it's a vision. So it's still true that no man has seen God, because this is a vision. But at least men have seen him in vision. And it tells you what he looks like in this vision. His garment was white as snow, the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. But here's the point I want to emphasize. The judgment was set, and the books were open. All right, we're going to take a little while to consider what is said here, and I'll try to explain the significance of this before we go any further. So, There is a reason why John is given this vision of God sitting on a throne and all of these thousands ministering unto him. There's a reason why John is given this vision. And I can tell you now that we are going to come back to this vision. We're going to come back and do a close examination of it point by point, not this evening, but probably next week or the week after. We're going to come back and look at what is happening here. Because there are elements that are put here in the book of Daniel that appear in the book of Revelation. And the theologians say John borrowed from Daniel. Absolute rubbish. John didn't borrow anything from Daniel. God spoke to Daniel, and then God spoke to John. And in both cases, God gave them the same description. John didn't design his book, God designed it. So if you see something in the book of Revelation that looks like the book of Daniel, it's not John's fault. It's not John to be credited. It's God giving you a clue that says, look at this in Revelation and compare it with Daniel, and you will understand something more clearly. So we will come back to this passage absolutely when we reach to the book of Revelation. But I want us to highlight at this point now where he says that the judgment was set and the books were opened. I want to highlight this. The judgment was set and the books were opened. So, I remind you of the question that we asked the last time we looked at this passage. And the question is, which judgment are we talking about? Are we talking about at the end of 1,000 years, God sits upon a great white throne, and it says, I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. Is this what we are talking about? Or Jesus says in Matthew 25 that when the Son of Man shall appear in his glory, then before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from the other, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will say to the goats on the left and to the sheep on the right. Is this what we are talking about? It says the judgment was set and the books were opened. So the question that I want us to consider, and I know that most of us are very familiar with this, and you know when you're familiar with something, it's very difficult to keep your attention. It's very difficult for you to focus. But what I can tell you, brothers and sisters, is that when you keep looking at things like this and you keep renewing the information in your mind and asking yourselves questions about the same thing, you gain insight, you gain greater conviction, you gain a greater appreciation of what God is trying to say. And that is what we want. You don't necessarily grow because you are learning something new every day. You grow because the things that you know are being renewed in your mind and your experience every day. You're growing. Sometimes you feed on the same material, but the same material is building you up. So don't feel distressed if you have been through this before. You know, they have a little joke in Jamaica. Well, it's a little folk tale or something, but they say that the wasp went to the bees to learn how to make honey. And then after the bees taught him how to make the comb, he said, I know how to do this. And he left, and the bee said, no, no, it's not done. The wasp says, I know enough. And he went away. And from that day, all the wasp can do is build a comb, but it can't make honey. So it's a good little story in terms of sometimes how people treat the Bible. They get a little piece and they run off and they think that they have all they need, and they don't go any further. We don't want to be like the wasp, all right? So my mother always used to accuse some of us of being like wasps, because when she was trying to teach something, we got a little bit and then we didn't want to know anymore. So a good thing to remember when it comes to Bible study: don't be like the wasp. Now, so the question is, when is this judgment? So I'm going to go to Daniel 7, and I want you to take it with me verse by verse, because I am so, I'm amazed, and I'm also disturbed that so many Christians do not see a pre-Advent judgment in the Bible. I'm wondering, how can you not see it? I want you to look with me at Daniel 7 and and join me with the question: how can you not see a pre-Advent judgment? And I'm not defending anything except the Bible, right? I don't care about any denomination or anything. I just want to I just want to accept what the Bible says. Now, all right, we went through the first few verses, and we saw lion, bear, leopard, and we saw the terrible beast, right? Then we saw the horns that came up on the head of the beast, and we saw another little horn, and it had the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. So there's a sequence: lion, bear, leopard, terrible beast, 10 horns, little horn, speaking great things. So far, everything is in sequence. The next thing that John sees, that Daniel sees, the next thing I beheld, if you look at the translation on the right panel, what it really implies, I kept on looking. I kept on looking. So that is a proper translation. When he says, I beheld, I keep on beholding, or I kept on looking, until the thrones were put in place, and God the Father, the Ancient of Days, took a seat. So there's a sequence: lion, bear, leopard, terrible beast, 10 horns, little horn, then God takes a seat. Now, somebody might say, I feel I need to write this down. I feel I need to write this down because I don't want to be at the place where I'm leaving anybody behind. So let me write this down. Lion, is this big enough for everybody to see? I think I should enlarge it a bit, right? Shouldn't I? I think so. Big enough? All right, surely that's big enough. All right. Lion, bear, leopard, terrible beast, little horn, judgment set. All right, so what what I'm saying is that there is a definite sequence that takes place here. This is number one, number two, number three, number four. Please bear with me. I'm trying to be very, very kindergarten about doing this, but sometimes that is helping somebody. Number five, then number six. So what you can see is that in the book of Daniel, what follows the little horn is the judgment we are talking about. Now somebody might say, but in this place, in between the little horn and the judgment, in here, there's a great gap in time. God gave us a great gap. And, Daniel doesn't talk about this gap, but there's a gap between the little horn and the judgment. Maybe, let us see. And they will say that this judgment is actually taking place at the end of the 1,000 years or sometimes in the far future. So just because it follows, it doesn't mean it follows immediately. There could be a gap in there. When I'm saying things like this, I'm always anxious that if anybody doesn't understand, you stop me. Please do stop me and let me know. so I can repeat what I said, because I'm making a point that is important, and I'd like to know that everybody is understanding what I'm saying. All right. So if you don't say anything, I'm going to assume that everybody is following with me and you're understanding. Now I'm going to come back to this in a moment. All right.
Doesn't the fact that it says I kept looking kind of imply that gap? Like, is that what gives you the idea that there is that gap? Because he lists all the beasts, and then all of a sudden he says, I kept looking, right? Like down through time, and then the judgment was set.
Sure, it could imply that there is a gap, but I suppose it depends upon how we interpret that. I kept looking, because I can say, as I was looking, I saw an animal coming out of the sea, and as I was looking, I saw this terrible beast. As I kept on looking, I saw this scene change, because he could mean I kept looking, because he could put it this way, because he's about to speak about now a change of scenery, because so far what he has been looking at is kingdoms rising and falling on earth. But now suddenly his attention switches to somewhere else and to something completely different. Now he's looking at God. So that could account for the fact that where he says I kept looking, it means I didn't move my eyes from the scenery, but it changed. So it really depends upon on how a person would approach it. So I'm not going to use that particular evidence. What I want to do is to look at other things that are involved here in the passage that can give us a clear idea of where and when this judgment takes place. That's the point I want to prove. Where and when? Where and when? Is it after 1,000 years? Where does it take place? So let's move down a little bit further and we can see, because we are reading the Bible together. And we are students of the Bible, and we are not students of Adventism or Ellen White or anybody like this. We are Bible students, and so we are listening to the Bible, and we are not making any assumptions. And when people say that if you believe in a pre-Advent judgment, it's because you are brainwashed by this group or that group. We want to tell them that what they are saying is absolute rubbish. That what we believe is clearly taught in the Bible. And we want to be able to demonstrate that it is clearly taught in the Bible. It goes on to talk about, yes, the judgment was set and the books were open. Now, the next thing that happens, look at the next thing that happens. Here's the point. I beheld then, and it's the same thing that he says earlier on. If you look at the NASB, it says, then I kept looking. And Daniel keeps looking, and then he sees that he keeps looking because of these great words that the little horn is speaking. What Daniel is suggesting is that I didn't take away my attention from what the horn was doing, because the words that he was speaking grabbed my attention. That's what Daniel seems to be saying. If you look at the right panel, then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. So what Daniel is suggesting, that his attention was distracted because he saw something happening up in heaven, and then he turns his attention again to what is happening to the horn. So he looks back at the horn because of the great words that the horn is speaking. And what does he see? He says, I beheld, I kept looking even till the beast was slain and his body was destroyed and given to the burning flame. Let me go back to my screen here. What follows after the judgment is set? What follows? The next thing that happens is the beast is given to the burning flame.
David,
Yes, 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 it says.
I don't know how important it is, but you left the 10 horns out of your list.
All right, thank you, Esther. I thought to put the horns on the list, but I didn't want to make them separate from the terrible beast, because it just says that there was a terrible beast and he had 10 horns. So the text sort of identifies them with the beast, and they don't do anything of themselves. All of the elements I've put in here, they do something, but the 10 horns don't do anything. The only thing we saw is that the little horn came up and he plucked up three of the 10 horns. So the little horn is the one who is doing the damage and he's speaking great words. That's why I didn't include him, Esther. So, number 7, the beast is given to the burning flame. Now, if this is true, let's just for a moment eliminate number 6. Everything else makes sense. Everything else makes sense. You have the lion, he comes a while, he goes. The bear comes, goes. The leopard comes, goes. The terrible beast comes, goes. The little horn comes, and what happens? He and the beast are given to the burning flame. So that should be number 6. But instead of number 6, what do we have? We have the judgment sitting between number 5 and number 7. We have the judgment sitting between number 5 and number 7. Remember, I'm asking you to look at what is happening in Daniel 7 and to be honest as we are looking at it. The judgment is sitting between the work of the little horn and the beast given to the burning flame. If you look at the Bible, you can't believe that this judgment does not take place before Jesus comes again. So let me tie it together by asking another question. When is the beast given to the burning flame? When is the beast given to the burning flame? Let me go to another book in the Bible. Generally speaking, I don't want to do this, but because this is very clear and there can be no question about it, that's why I'm going to another book, which is the book of Revelation. But the point I want to make in the book of Revelation, and I'm in chapter 18 of Revelation now. And if you look at Revelation 18, what we see happening, not 18, it's 19 I want. 19 I want. I want Revelation 19. What we see happening in Revelation 19 is the return of Jesus. If you look at verse 11, it says, I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. And it tells you he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. He goes on to say, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, clean and white. Out of his mouth there's a sharp sword, and with it he will smite the nations. He has on his vesture and his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. All of this tells you this is Jesus coming back again. You go down to the end of the chapter, and it says in verse 19, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. They are gathered together to make war against Christ and his people, right up to the time of the coming of Christ. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire, burning with brimstone. When is the beast given to the burning flame? When is the beast destroyed? It says it happens at the second coming of Jesus, when heaven opened and Jesus is represented as riding upon a white horse. This is the time when the beast is destroyed. So with that in mind, I want you to look back at the list we have here. The beast is given to the burning flame. So we know that this represents what? This represents the coming of Jesus. And this represents the terrible deeds of this little horn, whatever this little horn is. We're not going to look at that today. That's not what we're dealing with. But in between the little horn and in between the coming of and the coming of Jesus, bracketed in there, there is a judgment. The judgment is set. The judgment takes place during the time of the little horn, or after the time of the little horn, sometime there after the little horn is doing his work, while the little horn is speaking his great words, and before the coming of Jesus. The judgment takes place before the coming of Jesus. Now I want to pause and I want to ask if there is anybody who doesn't understand what I just said. This is the Bible teaching clear as it can get that there is a judgment that takes place before Jesus comes again. So when we talk about a pre-advent judgment, the only way you can avoid really accepting it is you have to cut out that part out of the book of Daniel. There is no 2-3 ways about what Daniel is saying. There is a judgment that takes place. And let me show you, let me go on to emphasize or to strengthen the point that this is absolutely clear in the book of Daniel. Let's go back to where it says, I kept on looking because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. It's while the horn is speaking. It's while the horn is speaking. So the horn is still active upon the earth. The horn is still active while the judgment is taking place. The horn is still active. And then because of the word that he is speaking, the beast is slain and his body is given to the burning flame. Who makes that decision and where does that happen? That decision is made in the judgment. And who gives this beast to the burning flame? It is the judgment that delivers the beast to the burning flame. So the point that is very, very clear is that there is a judgment that takes place. And it is strikingly evident and strikingly disturbing that something like this that is taught in the Bible and which apparently is of great importance is so widely ignored by Christians in general. Now look at what it says in verse 12. All of this helps to further cement our understanding of the issue we are looking at. It says, as concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. At first, that doesn't seem to make sense. What it seems to suggest is that, okay, the beast is given to the burning flame, but the rest of the beasts, like the lion, the bear, the leopard, what happens to them is that their kingdom is taken away, but they continue to live. So it looks like the beast is gone, but the other beasts are still there, the lion, the bear, and the leopard. Is that what it is saying? No. It seems that way at first, but when you look at it closely, what is it saying? It's talking about the absolute end of the beast, the way the beast is cut off. He's cut off, bang! And when he's cut off, nothing is left. Every animal that dies or that is overthrown continues for a while. When Cyrus and Darius overthrew Babylon, the kingdom of Babylon continued for a while. It didn't just disappear that same night. No. It was conquered, but it continued to exist for a while, and it continued until gradually it deteriorated. They say that today some of the Iraqis, the Iraqi people, they are from that same region of Babylon, whatever. But I know that the kingdom of Babylon just dissipated and disappeared. It doesn't exist again today. But it didn't just disappear overnight. Their lives were prolonged for a season and for a time. Babylon, Medo-Persia was conquered by Greece, and it continued for a season and a time. When Greece was conquered by Rome, it continued for a season and a time. But when Rome is overthrown, is it to continue for a season and a time? No, what the Bible is telling us, what God is telling us is that when Rome is overthrown, the end is like you chop off a man's head and throw it in the fire. Nothing remains of Rome. It is given to the burning flame. Rome comes to an end decisively, conclusively, comprehensively, and it does not continue one day after it is destroyed. This is the decision of the judgment. But hold on, it's not finished yet. Look at the next verse. Verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Now, this verse helps us to identify where this judgment is taking place. Remember, John said he saw the Son of Man, this Ancient of Days, sitting where? He was sitting on a throne. And what was he doing on the throne? He came to the throne to judge. It was judgment, right? So now, somebody, Daniel sees somebody. If I keep saying John, forgive me, my mind sometimes loses focus. Daniel sees somebody that he describes as the Son of Man. Why does he refer to him as the Son of Man? Because Jesus, nobody knew that Jesus would come and identify himself as the Son of Man. When Daniel says the Son of Man, he's not talking about Jesus because he doesn't know Jesus. Why does he say the Son of Man? Because he's looking at something happening in heaven. And a man does not belong in heaven. He's looking and he sees the Ancient of Days, and he sees angels, and he sees 10,000 times 10,000 of angels. And when he looks, he sees a man. He sees a man appearing in the group. And so he says, I saw one like the Son of Man. I looked, and when I looked at the scene that I saw before me in heaven, I saw somebody looking like a Son of Man. I saw somebody looking like a human being. This is how John describes the Savior hundreds of years before he knew of him and before Christ was born. The word that he used was the Son of Man. And that may be one of the reasons that when Jesus came, he gave himself that title, the Son of Man. It was to certify that he was the one prophesied of in the book of Daniel. So this Son of Man comes, and where does he come? It says he comes with the clouds of heaven, and he came to the Ancient of Days. Now, one of the things that we sometimes do as Bible students, you look at a word or a phrase and you jump to conclusions. It says he comes with the clouds of heaven. If you go to Revelation chapter 1, Revelation 1, and I think it's verse 10. If you look at is it verse 10? No, it's not. I don't think it's verse 10. Um, but I'll find the verse and tell you very quickly. Oh, yes, verse 7. Verse 7. It talks about the coming of Jesus, and it says, behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him. And if you go to the book of Acts, you'll find that the angels who were speaking to the disciples after Jesus ascended, they said, this same Jesus shall so come in like manner as you have seen him going to heaven. So he went away with clouds, and he will come back with clouds. And these verses tell you. So when we go to the book of Daniel, some people immediately jump to the conclusion, since it says the clouds of heaven, it means that this is the second coming of Jesus. But look at the passage and let the passage speak to you. Don't jump to any conclusions. The passage says he came to the Ancient of Days. This is not Jesus returning to earth. This is Jesus coming to the presence of the Father. This is a human being, the Son of Man, coming into the presence of God the Father. Notice also, it doesn't just say he came with the clouds. It says he comes with the clouds of heaven. These are clouds that belong to heaven, not to earth. Let me put in that part, because what I believe this is a cloud of angels. Okay, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Daniel sees a cloud, and Jesus is sitting on this cloud, or he's in the middle of this cloud, and this cloud accompanies him into the presence of God the Father. And what happens? It says there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. Now, the point I want to make here, and I'm getting the feeling that this presentation will have to be continued next week, because I feel like I've been expending a lot of energy. I can't do otherwise because my spirit is in this study. But at the same time, I'm beginning to feel a little bit drained now, and I feel like there's so much that remains that I should say that it might be prudent to cut it cut it shortly, and then I can have a more time and more focus in dealing with the other part of it. So probably I should leave that part till next week. But let me conclude before I close off. Let me conclude what I'm trying to say here. So the point I want to make, brothers and sisters, let me go back to my screen here. The point I want to make is that if you follow the sequence, you will end up with the right conclusion. The next thing that happens is that the Son of Man was given an everlasting kingdom. All right. So I'm going to take out this mauve-looking gap that I had put in. I had put in this gap in here and say possibly there could be a gap in there, but based on what we have looked at, this gap doesn't really belong here. There's no gap of 1,000 years or any great length of time. It is while the little horn is speaking blasphemous words that the judgment sits. And in the judgment, there are two consequences. Let me write that down. Maybe I should put that in a different color as well so we can get the point. In the judgment, there are two consequences. The first of them is that the beast is given to the burning flame. So that's part one of the judgment. Part one of the judgment. The beast is given to the burning flame. And part two, the Son of Man is given an everlasting kingdom. So the judgment that we are talking about, this judgment was set and the books were opened. It's not a judgment primarily of individual people. It's not a judgment to see if Brother Ken is ready to be saved. It's not a judgment to see if Brother David has lived a righteous enough life to make it into heaven. According to the book of Daniel, the place where we find this pre-Advent judgment, according to the book of Daniel, there are two things that are involved in this. One of them is the beast, and the other one is the Son of Man. These are the two agencies that are involved in the judgment. The consequence is that one of them goes to the burning flame. He doesn't make it. And the other one receives an everlasting kingdom. Two consequences. You know what this reminds me of? It's not the same thing by any means, but it reminds me of the two people that Joseph met in prison, the king's baker and the king's butler. And both of them had a dream in the same night, and one of them, they dreamed very similar dreams, but one of them, the consequence of his dream was that he was hanged, and the other one was that he was restored to his job, and he was restored to honor and given back his job. It seemed to be the same event for both of them, but one was unto dishonor and death, and the other one was unto good things. And it's kind of similar here. One judgment, two consequences. The first consequence is that the beast is given to the burning flame, and the second is that the Son of Man is given an everlasting kingdom. So right away, what the point is that we can see that the purpose of the judgment, or the purpose of the judgment, is to judge between the beast and the Son of Man. It's to decide between the two kingdoms, the kingdom of the beast and the kingdom of the Son of Man, because the judgment makes a decision, makes a determination concerning each of those kingdoms. So that's the point where I am going to stop this evening. There is of course a lot more detail relating to this that I want to get into, but in the interest of preserving my voice and not taking on too much this evening, I'm going to stop at this point this evening, and next week we'll go into some more details to further strengthen and settle and prove what I've tried to establish, what I just was able to touch on this evening. All right. Go ahead, Brother Ken.
Question.
All right,
Oh,
Brother Tony,
go
Brother
ahead,
Ken
Bill.
afterwards. Yes, Brother Ken, go ahead.
I just had a quick question about the pre-advent judgment. Could that also include the separating of the wheat and tares?
Right. I'm not going to go into that in detail, but at least not until we get to the book of Revelation. But absolutely, if we are talking about the examination of two kingdoms, when you have when you look at a kingdom, you can't examine a kingdom without looking at the people. The state of the people is really an index of the state of the kingdom. And so clearly, we are talking about the people being involved. And, as you pointed out, it involves the separation of the wheat and the tares and several other things. But those to me are secondary issues that come in afterwards, because to understand the big picture of what is really the point of it all, what's the point of it all, I think that's the most important thing to grasp at the moment. And then when we begin to break down into the book of Revelation, we can see how it involves those subheadings. Yes, Brother Tony, go ahead.
Okay, when we talking about the beast, we're talking about Satan, right?
Well, only in a secondary sense. If
Right.
you right, if you look at the pattern, Jesus is the Son of God, and God's Son stands up to defend His kingdom. The beast is the son of Satan, in a manner of speaking, and he stands up to defend Satan's kingdom. So you have, so the beast is not really Satan, but you could say he's Satan's baby.
But
He's
when the
Satan.
beast is thrown into the lake of fire, isn't that the destruction of Satan?
No, 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 no. Let me just show this very clearly, Brother Tony. Let me just answer that question by going back to my Bible screen and just making that clear, because just in case there's anybody else who has this question in mind, there are three entities that are highlighted in the book of Revelation as being a part of a league of evil. And they are the dragon, that's Satan, and there's the beast,
Right, right.
that's
Okay, and the
Satan's
false
food,
prophet.
and the
Right.
false prophet. There are three different things. The beast and the
Okay,
false prophet are
okay.
thrown into the lake of fire at the end
Right,
of at the coming of Jesus. But Satan is thrown there 1,000 years later.
right. That's in Revelation 20, right?
That's right. So they are very, very different.
Now, okay. So before the dragon is thrown into the fire, Jesus receives his inheritance, and
Absolutely.
Satan gets to see this, right?
Definitely. Then he's
Right.
put in the lake
But
of
the
fire.
beast doesn't see it.
Well, the beast is made up of people. The beast
Right, right,
organization is destroyed, but the people are coming back for the judgment.
right, right. Okay.
So it's that's the question. Your question makes me understand the importance of highlighting something. Because the kingdom of Satan is personified as a beast, as individual. Sometimes it becomes a little confusing, and we don't quite follow through in understanding that it's not a literal beast. So the eyes of the beast are the people. The,
Right.
the the work of the beast is the people, just like how the eyes of Christ here on this earth are us, and the work of Christ is us. So we say Christ is working on the earth, but it is we who are the feet and the hands.
Mm,
So it's similar between both kingdoms.
okay.
Brother David, can I ask a quick question for
Absolutely, my
clarification?
sister. Questions are always
Ah,
welcome.
okay. So, all right. At the actual coming of Christ, right? The beast organization, will it be like destroyed by the brightness of Christ coming with earthquake and all of that? Because, as you said, it's not really Satan who will be destroyed. Okay, he will be destroyed 1,000 years later, and I got that. So this system. whatever it is? Will it be destroyed at the actual brightness? Like when Jesus comes, as he said, there will be earthquake, da da da. I mean, how will it be destroyed?
Right. So when you look at it in the book of Revelation, it describes the destruction of everything, every power on this earth, because it says, I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together. And it says the birds were invited to come and to eat the flesh of kings and of great men and so forth. And
Okay.
why does it say that the beast and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire, but it does not say that the people are thrown into the lake of fire? It's the beauty of the book of Revelation, because let me explain this, okay?
Mm.
Will the Adventist denomination come back after the coming of Jesus? What do you think?
No, it will not.
No, there won't be any denominations in heaven.
Right,
So the,
right.
the Adventist denomination will be put in the lake of fire at the coming of Jesus. And every denomination. So what is the lake of fire? The lake of fire is the end of something permanently. So when it says that the beast is put in the lake of fire, it means that the beast organization ceases to exist at the coming of Jesus. It's not really even necessarily talking about the way that the people might die, or it's not necessarily talking about the buildings fall down and the institutions are devastated. No, no. It means that at the coming of Jesus, the institution of the beast, that is the end. It never ever comes back. The people come back 1,000 years later, so they are not in the lake of fire. But anything that ceases to exist, it's in the lake of fire. Because we have if you don't, if you never looked at the meaning of the lake of fire, this might be a little confusing. But as most of us have come to understand, the lake of fire is a coded phrase, and what it means is the end of existence. So when death no longer exists, it says that death is in the lake of fire. When the grave no longer exists, it says that the grave is in the lake of fire. When Satan no longer exists, it says that Satan is in the lake of fire. So when the beast kingdom ceases to exist, it is said to be in the lake of fire. So I hope that answers the question, Sister Venice.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, so maybe that takes care of the questions for this evening. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate the time. And to be honest, I love the subject so much. I would um, I would talk about this all night, but on this occasion, I'm going to be prudent and say I'm a little glad that my voice can take a break and I can go relax a little bit. So I will just satisfy myself with saying I love you all and I appreciate the fact that you're with me day after day, week after week. It means a lot to me. I hope we're all being blessed and I hope we're all being benefited with a closer walk with our Father. God bless you all until I see you again.
Thank you, Dave.